mustakabali wa taifa.
Nakumbuka leo mjadala uliopita, watazamaji walikuwa takriban milioni 37.
Na kwa hivi sasa, kwa sababu ndio kiti muhimu zaidi na kiti cha ngazi ya juu zaidi katika nchi yetu ya Kenya, usiwe na wasiwasi, tarajia idadi iweze kusonga juu zaidi. Kumbuka ndani kule pia kutakuwa na watakaoendesha mijadala hii miwili kwa mpigo. Kwa ufupi, tupo wengi, lakini lengo letu ni wewe mtazamaji.
Kwa hivyo mtazamaji, mbona tusimpishe wenzetu Rita Tinina
na Kennedy Muridhi upande wa pili watueleze mengi kwa lugha ya Uingereza.
Naam, shukran Lulu na Rashid. From this other end, my name is Rita Tinina from KTN News.
And my name is Kennedy Muridhi from NTV.
Here at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, this debate is an initiative of the Media Owners Association, the Media Council of Kenya, and the Kenya Editors Guild, working with various organizations as partners. And this debate, perhaps watching or following from wherever you are, you would have no idea what goes on behind the scenes to make this a success. Money, time, manpower. It is an illustration, this particular debate, an illustration of the synergy of the local media at its very best. We have several teams, the editorial, digital, ICT, security, research, guest relations have been working for weeks to make this day a success. And so for the presidential candidates who have been selling their agenda on the campaign trail this evening, hundreds and millions will be watching either on television, following on radio or on digital platforms, not just here in Kenya, but across the world. Kennedy.
Well, and indeed, Rita, what they will be looking for is to convince the over 22 million voters that have been registered by the IEBC. And going by the numbers that have been there, this might be that election that Kenyans might turn up in their numbers just to make sure that they vote for that one person that they do believe will represent them as the president in the August 9 elections. What are we looking at? Just as my colleague Lulu Hassan has said, in the last televised debate, we saw over 34 million Kenyans who took their time to watch either on television or online, and also from the diaspora. But we do expect, probably this one being the presidential debate, we expect the numbers might go up to 40 million. So we do expect probably that when it kicks off, and already indications are that all the candidates will be attending this debate, then it will make sure that everybody is ready for this.
And indeed, Kenyans had a chance to send in their questions, their concerns they want. A link from the digital platform of the presidential debate. Organizers gave that opportunity, and Kenyans sent in hundreds and hundreds of questions. And a quick analysis of those questions can indicate that Kenyans are concerned and they want clarity on almost basically the same things.
Well, there are two key things that have turned out into this election. That is corruption and also the question of the economy. How do we turn around the economy? And these are some of the questions that might be turning out with the moderators, as they will be making sure that they prod the candidates as they turn out. There's the question of the cost of living, where people believe that it has gone up. There's the question of quality education. Also, there is the question of making where people want to know how this government is going to speak to the needs, or the incoming government is going to speak to the individual needs that are there. Remember, also there's the question of quality health care.
And indeed, this first debate that we are expecting to start at 5:30, this is the debate between the Roots Party presidential candidate George Wajackoyah and the Agano Party presidential candidate Mwaure Wahiga. This will be one debate to watch out for, and it will be quite interesting. Why? Because these are two presidential candidates whose ideas are worlds apart. You have a professor with radical ideas. On the other hand, you have a cleric and a lawyer. On one hand, Professor Wajackoyah, in the Kenyan context, giving ideas that you would term unusual. He wants to legalize marijuana. He wants to introduce as well the export of dog meat. He wants those found guilty of corruption hanged, and he wants to introduce a 4-day working week. So those ideas engaging Mwaure Wahiga, whose manifesto sort of compared to George Wajakoya's radical issues. He wants to, among other things, fight corruption mainly through asset recovery. He wants to eradicate, or rather do away with pay as you earn. And I'm told Joe, on the other hand, is ready, and Joe, now give you that opportunity to go on with your panel.
All right, thank you very much, Rita Tinina. As Rashid and Lulu would say, ndio ukoko unaalika maua. That is to say, we are here all set, and I'll be having a panel here to look at all those things that these candidates are going to speak about, what they ought to speak about, and later on, we'll actually talk about what they did not speak about. My name is Joe Agayo from NTV, and here in this outdoor studio, we will have pundits here all evening long, and I'll start with introducing them. On the far right, we have Houghton Irungu, who is Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya. Next to me, Wanjiru Gikonyo, National Coordinator for TISA, the Institute for Social Accountability. On my left, we have Sheila Masinda, who is the Executive Director of Transparency International Kenya. Professor Alex Awiti, who is a researcher in sustainable development and public policy. And last but not least, Dennis Kabara, who is a management and governance analyst and consultant. Ladies and gentlemen, these debates, we will start one in the next 80 minutes, but these debates are coming on the backdrop of controversy. Are some candidates coming? Are they not coming? Perhaps we could just start by establishing just how important these debates are, and I'll start with you, Houghton.
Thank you, Joe. I mean, I think you have to look at this presidential debate from both a historical perspective, but also what this means for the future. And I think the historical significance for me has always been that, you know, there was a time that Africans did not vote in this country, that we had no say, there was no public debate about who would be elected. It was in 1921 that the first election took place. Arabs, Europeans and Asians voted. No African person voted. It was really until late 50s, early 60, I think it's 61, when we had the first election where both African men and women voted simultaneously. And this is interesting because in America it took 100 years for American women to basically follow their men and vote. But in the Kenyan context, they voted simultaneously. What happened after that first moment? Multipartyism was disintegrated by the one-party state. The right to free expression was crushed, and the opportunity for people to be able to vote and to stand was destroyed. And it's really until Article 1 that we have seen a legal framework that says that people matter. It is not elites that matter in elections, it's people that matters. And that's why I think it's so important that we cultivate this idea of debate as being the center of our democracy and at the center of constitutionalism. I mean, I could give you five strong arguments.
Houghton, I'll stop you there because Professor Wajakoya, there he is arriving because we hadn't expected him until a few moments ago. And Rashid Abdallah is with them. Rashid, kazi kwako.
If we are not for, I'm not attending.
Naam, labda kwa dakika moja tu, maana huko tunaona kusubiri na wale ambao wanafuatilia, labda kwa kufika kwako, matarajio yako na msimamo wa mjadala ni upi?
I am not attending unless we are for. That's why I've come to confirm, because this thing is too far. Sorry, because they never responded to my letter. And if the media wants to corrupt the intelligence of this society, if the media wants to run corruption in this country, if the media itself can do what they have done, to hell with them. Where's Mr. Omari?
Na kwa ufupi ni kwamba utafanya mjadala.
I am not going to unless we are for.
Na bila shaka nafikiri umeweza kusikia mtazamaji, kwa hivi sasa ameweza sema ameshafika Profesa George Wajakoya, yuko tayari kwa mjadala, lakini labda pendekezo lake ni moja tu, kama watakuwa wanne katika kikao hicho ndio ataweza kufanya mjadala. Kwa nafikiri kwamba hivi sasa na fursa ya kuzungumza na wamiliki wa vyombo vya habari kama alivyosema, awasikize, watoe mwelekeo kuhusiana na maombi aliyoyatoa, alafu baadaye atatupa mwelekeo kama atashiriki, kama atoshiriki. Kwako Joageo.
All right, shukran. Rashid Abdallah speaking to George Wajakoya is arrived, and I think we will just continue with what you were saying. Houghton, this is interesting. He's arrived, but you know he's saying there are still conditions.
I think you know, politicians can't give conditions to the media who have no control over the participation of other candidates. I think the responsibility of the media is to provide an equal, fair, open debate for all political candidates to come forward. And I think it's the responsibility of candidates and the humility of candidates to say that they are willing to come before the nation and seek a job that is the highest job in the land. And I think that is where I would start with that.
Okay. Let me go to the other flank. Dennis, what do you make of all this?
No, I think this is important. Debates are important. Debates are important, as I think Irungu has made very good about, has talked a lot about history. I think one of the things that we have a challenge in Kenya with is actually having discussions, exchanging views. So for me, it makes total sense that we have debates, that we have people exchanging views, agreeing to disagree, and basically telling the Kenyans what they're going to do. So I think this is totally important for us.
All right, Sheila?
I agree with my co-panelists. This forum is important. I know that politicians are not used to moderated forums. Yeah. We're used to seeing them in public rallies where they're shouting at us and chiming on. But this is a forum where we expect, and what we have seen in the last 2 weeks is a moderated, very, in a sense, controlled discussion, which enables us to be able to get the gist of what their campaigns are about, what their manifestos and plans are about, and what they really are about, looking at even some of the questions that have been asked around their values and issues around integrity. So it's important because we don't get to get a sense of all this when they're out there in public rallies. So this is an important forum. I know that there's been a lot of investment looking at the sheer infrastructure set up for this debate. So I think it's important that politicians honor this. I know that even at the local level, there are various attempts to bring together members of county assembly, members of parliament, and the reaction on the ground is when one misses a debate that you're really not honoring us. And I think this is the perception that some Kenyans have, although there's also a school of thought that says, by the time people are watching a debate, they've already made up their mind. So it's either to reaffirm their love and admiration for you, or to confirm why they are not going to vote for you in the first place. But all in all, it's an important forum to enable Kenyans to see, get to hear from you in more depth what you're planning to do for Kenya.
Thank you. Yet, Professor Witi, there are people who say, at least if you go by the polls and all the different conversations we've had about this election, that there seems to be an uncharacteristically high number of undecided voters, even as late as a week or two ago. How does that square with the need thereof of a debate such as this one?
Thanks, Joe. I think voters are tuned in, and I am really sympathetic because this, to me, has been a very arid political season. There is a devastating, blistering drought of great ideas that are required in this transformative moment to move the country forward. And that's the reason why voters have checked out. That's why a lot of people don't feel that the politicians, the four running for president, have articulated anything that is remotely adjacent to the critical issues that are needed to move the country forward. Their manifestos...
How do you mean? I mean, they all have manifestos.
Yeah, the manifestos are a mile wide, but they're not even an inch deep in terms of how they frame the issues. Everybody's got this long list that any Kenyan can spew out. Agriculture, employment, energy, infrastructure, education, but there is nothing substantive that is transformative, which these politicians are saying. Everybody's got a bunch of proposals that are completely unfunded. We have a devastating deficit right now of 862 billion.
So what's missing?
What's missing is a coherent plan that basically addresses the fundamental issues in a transformative way. We're hungry today. When I worked in agriculture many years ago in Western Kenya, 9 out of 12 months, farmers who till the land every single day were hungry. If you look at the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics census on household food security, it's still the same picture. People in rural areas are more food insecure than urban people who are working. Agriculture is not working. Some of the input supply, input subsidy programs are not working, like fertilizer application rates, for instance, are extremely low. Extension services are broken. So you give farmers fertilizer, they're applying it on soils that are not ready to take fertilizer. So these are some of the fundamental things. So to put more money at this bad problem is the problem. And you see the manifesto that has been advanced by Raila Odinga and William Ruto. It's exactly the same, more of the same. It's not going to change the trajectory that the country has taken so far.
Well,
that's why voters have checked out. I'm basically saying, what's the difference?
Well, at least Wajakoya has some radical 10 points, and we'll talk about them in a while. But Wanjiru, I wonder what your initial thoughts are about this debate.
It is important, and listening to the concerns that are being brought forward by Wajakoya, by Honorable Raila Odinga, my question from a public participation point of view is, as the media platform is created, is there usually a discussion with the political actors? Because if there isn't, there could be next time. I think there are a lot of Kenyans there that would have loved to see a debate with all the presidential candidates. So public participation and stakeholder engagement, I think, applies across the board. But given that we're here, I agree totally with what Sheila is saying, that we expect our leaders to be humble enough to avail themselves to field, to sell their proposals to the public. But I think the missing link, and my question as we engage in this very, this event is it too little too late? Because we have a situation where we have an administration that hasn't undertaken or supported public participation, hasn't supported civic education, hasn't supported voter education. And so even as the media strives to put together this platform, is it too little too late? And how do we ensure accountability? Because it's one thing to have manifestos, and I don't agree quite with the professor. I think the manifestos have some very good proposals that, if implemented, can transform some of the big issues that bedevil us.
Well, he's saying they're more of the same.
I don't agree with that in terms of substance, but what I do, the question is, where is the accountability? After the promise, how do we ensure implementation? Because we are seeing challenges on leadership and integrity even going into the campaign. We are seeing violations of the basic tenets of the law in the way the political parties have constituted themselves. So the challenge to me is, yes, it's good to have these platforms. We need to have them consistently across the board, not just before the major election, but annually we should have an accountability forum, asking the questions, asking the president.
But I've heard at least the organizers of the debate, say that the culture is picking up. I mean, you look at different neighborhoods, people are hosting candidates for MCA and different groups, whether it's religious groups, whether it is civil society people. There is this demand of the people who are, seeking different offices to come before the people and explain themselves.
It's not just when politicians are seeking votes that they need to field questions. And this debate is questions mainly from the media, who represent really good questions, but these questions should come from the ground. And I totally agree that this needs to be part of the culture, and as Sheila said, all the way to the local level. Political leaders need to be answerable to the public through these public forums, but also in other ways that we can ensure accountability, because after the promise, then what? And that could explain the undecided, because as Prof says, as Geshira says, if my issues have not been dealt with, why should I then get involved in this very intense electioneering period? It's more of the same.
Okay, I really want us to go into a bit of the manifestos and what these two gentlemen bring to the table. But I think there's an issue here, a national issue that all of us have seen play out with regard to where we are in terms of the preparations for this election that is now just 13 days away. And we've seen some back and forth between IEBC and DCI, for example. I wonder around this table how that makes us feel, and I'll start with you, Houghton.
Although we're probably not the best people to start with. As Amnesty, we don't do very much in terms of election oversight. But let me just give you a couple of thoughts. One is that, we have to keep in mind that public trust and credibility of institutions at a time like this is just so important. To have two independent institutions, the National Police Service / Director of Criminal Investigations and the Electoral Commission, scrapping in public.
All right, I'm always interrupting you because the other candidate, the Agano presidential candidate, is arriving there, David Wahiga Maure, and I'll go straight to Lulu Hassan, who is going to be speaking to him in a short while.
Na barabara kabisa, mpenzi mtazamaji, shukran sana Joe Ageyo. Kama mnavyoona tayari David Wahiga Mwaure tayari kisha wasili wa chama cha Agano akiwa na mgombea mwenza.
All right, that does seem that we're having a bit of a signal problem there, but yes, the gentleman you just saw there is the Agano presidential candidate, that is David Wahiga Mwaure, who is going to be taking part in this debate. And I just want to continue with that, getting some quick thoughts around this whole thing of what's really happening with the IBC. And I think maybe I go to Dennis.
I don't know. I've always been worried about IBC preparedness. There are no good signs. We're not seeing good signs. I don't want to be dramatic, but I wonder what these good signs mean in terms of the fate of the election itself, because it seems to be going worse. 2013, we were here. 2017, it got worse. Now we're 2022, it's even worse. It's just not prepared. And
but what's really the problem, according to you?
From a technical perspective, I think there's a way in which organization is not being done. The procurement is not being done well. We don't have the audit report from KPMG. We're not sure about ballot papers. Ballot papers are coming before Gazette notices are issued.
Okay, Dennis, I'm sorry. We have to go back, and I think we are now ready with the Agano presidential candidate Wahiga Mwaure.
Na barabara kabisa, mtazamaji, kama mnavyoona David Wahiga Mwaure tayari wa Agano Party kisha wasili kwa mjadala ambao umesubiriwa kwa hamu na gamu. Labda nimuulize mawili matatu kuhusiana na mjadala wa siku hii ya leo. Karibu sana David.
Asante sana dadangu.
Naam, umejitayarisha vipi siku hii ya leo?
Nimejitayarisha kabisa ili nikuje niwaeleze wa Kenya sababu gani ni lazima safari tubadilishe na sababu gani ni lazima wachague mtu mpya na yeye ndiye mimi. Tunakuja kuelewa kwamba hii ni miaka 59 kutoka wakati tulipata uhuru. Tumekuwa na tabu nyingi hata baada ya miaka hiyo yote. Na sisi wengine kama mimi nimeingia katika huu uchaguzi kwa sababu naamini ni wakati wa kufagia na kuleta wapya. Na kwamba kila ndoto ya yeyote, hata wewe ambaye huja kuwemo huku ndani, hujulikani, hujuna pesa nyingi ama mahelikopter, unaweza kuwa rais kama vile dada yetu Rupita alivyotuambia kila ndoto ni valid.
Na unahisi vipi kuhusiana na mjadala wetu siku hii ya leo? Unahisi vipi? Hisia zako ni gani?
Mimi kwanza nina furaha kwa sababu ni haki ya Wakenya kutusikia zote. Na natarajia hata kukutana na mgombea yule mwingine, my competitor, na hata wale wengine nawaambia wakuje ili Wakenya waelewe. Na mimi kile ninayofurahia ni ya kwamba yale tumekuwa tukiona kule nje, wakati mwingine hata watu hawasikizi sera ni gani. Wanaangalia magari, wanaangalia vipi, mapambo, lakini leo ni wakati wa kusikiza hasa ni nani anaweza kubadilisha maisha yako.
Okay, shukrani sana.
Asante na shukuru.
Okay. Ndio hivyo tumeweza kumsikia David Wahiga Mwaure akisema kwamba ataeleza sera zake kwa upana zaidi, akitumai kwamba yule mgombea mwenzake ambaye ni mpinzani wake wa Jakoya atakuwa yuko naye katika jukwaa lile. Ni mambo ambayo tunasubiri kuona mtazamaji, lakini kwa hivi sasa moja kwa moja na kurudisha kwake Joe Ageyo endelee na wachanganuzi.
Shukran, Lulu Hassan. So the Agano presidential candidate is in the house, and we will have to wait for that because the two platforms couldn't be more different. But we were talking about the IEBC preparedness and the back and forth we are seeing with the DCI. Dennis, I don't know if you had finished your thoughts.
No, for me, it's not the management problem. I think IEBC now presents for us a political and an economic risk.
Wow, that is big. What are you talking about?
It is. The uncertainty behind all these preparations, it's no longer about management and procurement. We're now talking about, are we going to have an election? Are we going to have an election that is successfully executed? Are we going to have an election that is not disputed? These are now political and economic risks. I think that's where we are.
Prof?
So, Joe, this is a historical problem. This is not just IEBC. The previous electoral bodies have had these same levels of institutionalized and government engineering competence because of what elections mean to our governance process. We've not had free and fair elections since 1992. This is not a disputable fact. I think the only credible election we had that we believe the outcome was 2002. So what IBC exhibits today is a comedy of errors in many respects, and institutional incompetence at a colossal, catastrophic level. One scholar of governance called Land Pritchard talks about governance in capability, and talks about isomorphic mimicry, where we've created an institution that mimics that which should be a functional institution that runs election. In every sense it looks like, but it doesn't function like one. So I think that in many respects, if you look at the last 4 elections, we've created a system where IBC is kind of an arm of government that inserts itself in diverting and subverting the will of the people. Now that has created interesting opportunities for perpetrating internal incompetence, in the sense that IBC is just not well organized as an institution with all the capabilities that it needs to run an election. Internally, we talk about procurement issues. We talk about just an election, a plan of action that you would execute to the D-Day of an election. If you ask Chebukati what he's been doing for the last 3 years in preparation for this election, you know, the voter register, the cleaning up of all of that, talking about electoral materials, the ballot papers, the security around that. And as Dennis says, this is an existential risk to the democracy, and is also a threat to the body polity of the country in terms of our sovereignty in many respects.
Sheila, how worried are you about this situation?
Well, the trust deficit levels have always been low for our election management bodies, and largely partly because of how some processes are conducted. Key among them is procurement of key strategic materials.
That must be something you follow keenly.
Yeah, we follow. Yes, we follow that keenly. And one of the things that we had urged IBC earlier on is in the spirit of open procurement, because we know the problem of procurement in this country. It is actually the center of corruption. Most corruption in this country emanates from public procurement. And so the interest that then the procurement of these strategic materials, the ballot papers, the technology has, it meant that there needed to be an attempt to ensure that there was open communication throughout, because when you're looking at some of the claims that were made, was it 3 weeks ago, coming from politicians, it comes from that whole organization of procurement. So my own take is that there should have been an attempt to be a bit more open, not a bit more, but actually very open in terms of communication, communicating with stakeholders, including the political class. But the other concern that I have is just the ability of our agencies to be able to work together. When you see that kind of spat between the police and IBC, and you wonder whether these are not some things that could have been resolved, bilaterally. Yeah, we expect them to work together. An election, it requires that you're working very closely with security agencies. And I would have expected that kind of, whether it's a misunderstanding or a dispute or whatever contention, should have been sort out, especially because we know how we easily sensationalize things around elections and politics, especially at this time. We're just 2 weeks to the elections. I would have expected that as a matter of national security, this is something that should have been handled. Of course, we of course, it's good that it's out in the open, so we know what issues are there, but then we also know that this is something that can potentially, spark several disputes, in regard to the election. And of course, I know the politicians are watching. It's probably a matter, if anyone is preparing the petition, it's already something
they're doing more than they're watching. They're talking a lot as well.
Yes. So my concern, Joe, is how our institutions are working, not just the police and IBC, but throughout the planning of this entire election. I have had my concerns in terms of our institutions to be able to work in collaboration. Yeah. Even when you look at how candidates were verified, vetted, and cleared, you could tell that clearly these institutions were not working together, and as a result of that, we now have people who are not credible, who don't meet the qualifications set out in the Constitution, who have been cleared for office. So this problem started earlier on in the election process.
Wow. It all sounds familiar, Wanjiru. Deja vu all over again?
Unfortunately, yes. This is a political problem, because the IBC is really, if you look at our democratic trajectory as Irungu was taking us, from the very start, we are trying to build a constitutional democracy, and we are trying to ensure that our governance is guided by the rule of law. That is where we are heading, and we are coming from a context where we had, an authoritarian, very corrupt regime through the 80s, through the 90s, and we are trying to reform this with the Constitution of Kenya. And the IEBC continues to be possibly our weakest link in our democratic process. And I would say this is a political problem, because the IEBC was not fully constituted until very recently,
last year, yes.
Until last year, and that was a failure on the part of, you would say, it's the political leadership. It's the government of the day, you would say, because having the majority of numbers in the House, having even through the handshake, the government, the administration had the wherewithal to be able to constitute IEBC adequately. Another factor with IEBC we continue to hear is the budget. That they do not get the allocations they need in terms of the budget. We also know there's a lot of horse trading and a lot of efforts to kind of influence. Of course, the way the IEBC is designed, political parties have a role in terms of the nominations of the constitution of the commissioners, but we then don't see the independence, and we get a sense there's a lot of interference happening behind the scenes. So the inability of IEBC to win the public trust, and the fear that it may, not perform to the level that's needed, is a political problem. And then we ask ourselves, we've had several by-elections run by the very IEBC, and we now see, as the stakes get very high, this IEBC is not able to, the institutions aren't working together.
All right, we need to go. I think yes, there is. That is Professor Wajakoya, the Roots presidential candidate. Not quite sure what he wants to say, but there he is outside. We'll just take you there and hear what he's talking about. All right, so we will keep that there as we monitor what that is about. But here with my panel, we are monitoring this together. And Prof, I see you are quite perplexed, perhaps amused by what's going on.
No, Dennis just remarked that Wajakoya is probably standing next to his lawyer, so I'm wondering whether he's going to sue the organizers of the presidential debate. So we have to
be careful what we say here, but we have to monitor what that's about as we continue. But I want us to talk a little bit about these two gentlemen and what they have placed on the table. And it is interesting, we are watching Wajakoya just now, and he has this thing that he calls a 10-point manifesto that has all kinds of things there. There is cannabis that has taken the country by storm, the whole conversation, and he has some people call it ganjanomics, because he has all these figures around it, and he has things like hanging the corrupt, he has things like shutting down the SGR, suspending the constitution, and selling all manner of body parts of hyenas and related things. I wonder what the thinking is, first overall, what his approach has been, Dennis, to this campaign, Professor Wajakoya.
I think for me, actually looking at all the manifestos, I think for me, what he's doing is he's saying, think out of the box. Let's think out of the box.
Some people say it's throwing out the box.
Some people say it's throwing out the box. I think it's, but in a way, and I think I've seen one comment about this, he's saying, let's think about ourselves on a journey to self-reliance. So all these ideas he has, hyenas and snakes and so on, they're all about generating revenue. It's about self-reliance. So for me, that is his message. And I think it's a sensible message. It has radical ideas, but it's a sensible message.
But Professor Witty, you say you haven't seen anything radical.
Well, and again, going back to that part about the manifestos, it's not saying that the manifestos don't exist. The question is how thoughtful and how realistic are these propositions. We've seen two cycles of truly memorable manifestos, 2013, 2017. We saw President Kenyatta run in 2013, in 2017, and actually just throw away the 2013 manifesto, not even make any references to it in terms of continuity. And we've seen him govern from 2017 to now, not even paying attention to any of the ideas that he put forth there. So I think sometimes I just tend to think that they're not even worth the paper they're written on, to the extent that there's no real commitment by these people and there's no way to hold them accountable. And again, set aside the manifestos. There is a government fiscal plan. There are so many constraints to basically executing government. I don't even know, in more developed democracies, there is a very deep conversation between the presidential candidates and the public service. Treasury, for instance, the key officers that run the bureaucracy in education, for instance, in agriculture, to basically understand what is it that we've been doing. Some of these manifestos read like this country does not even exist, that there is nothing. And these guys are basically reinventing the wheel. And that's what concerns me. But I think for Wajakoya, there's only one point that I wish the country could pay attention to in his manifesto. I think it's the 8th or 9th one, which talks about reducing the number of devolved units to 8.
Yes.
I think that to me is a very, very sensible proposition.
Yeah.
Let's face it, ladies and gentlemen and fellow citizens, devolution is a millstone on our necks. It is a very expensive enterprise. It is the most expensive way to do what we're trying to do.
And we will talk about it.
And it is totally unaccountable. It is expensive in the way that the money has been spent. And we don't even see it. Go to the counties and see